Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management, and we have been pursuing blue ocean strategy, wherein we have reached to a stage wherein we have tried to understand what strategic canvas does. How do we use the framework associated with strategy canvas? How do we think in terms of where do we stand, what should we do in terms of raising and creating things, and what should we do in terms of reducing and eliminating things as far as the whole situation goes. It is related to offerings, and I have tried to describe in front of you that offerings are associated with products as well as the organizational sphere. We have taken example of Honda Activa as well as Amazon on the other side, and several other organizations which have been doing exceptionally well. Now, I will try to build up the story as described by the authors W. Chan Kim and Rennie in terms of what these four elements of eliminate, reduce, raise and create do in this session, and then I would be taking you towards a framework, a formulation and execution framework in terms of blue ocean strategy in my subsequent session, as the authors have described that, and how should we actually take it on the ground. So, here again I would start from strategy canvas and some insights associated with that, then the four elements, what does the four elements do and how should we look upon those four elements, and then some example and a case to describe as described by the authors. We will use the similar kind of a case which authors have chosen to talk about, and then we will be focusing upon how these things can be structuralized. So, let us go ahead and think in terms of what blue ocean does. Now, look at this, we have talked about strategy canvas. So, eliminate, reduce, raise, create. Now, this I have left blank, and I will be going for drawing one thing for you as well in my subsequent discussion and slide. But again, here I wish for you to look at some of let us say a movie, or let us say a product, or let us say an organization. So, we can think in terms of 2-3 scenarios. For example, let us say Jurassic Park, and I am just giving you a food for thought. Can we fit or can we see Jurassic Park within this framework? When Steven Spielberg defined that how he should be going about a scientific thought which has a scientific basis and understanding, a historical perspective also, and so much of science associated, biological science associated with that. He studied and his team studied all the elements, described those elements for themselves, they structured those elements and then constituted a storyboard. Now, look at the situation. How can we look at this basically? How should we be looking at this? If we look at contemporaries associated with Jurassic Park, I would be talking about how W. Chan Kim has described that when you are thinking in terms of taking competitive advantage by pushing the competition aside or bypassing the competition. So, there is a sort of a competition which is very near to you, there is a slightly distant kind of that we will talk about, but just here just imagine there are 2-3 kinds of movies which Jurassic Park bypassed. How? For example, if somehow you have to tell about dinosaurs to this world, you might go for describing some historical perspective, some biological perspective, some evolutionary perspective, kind of, and several other kinds of scientific aspects associated with this kind of a progression in due course of time, how they vanished from this earth and what happened, and so much of science is there. So, that you can do in the form of interviewing people, generating or developing a documentary out of that, structuring that and then putting up a narrative around, then bringing in different kinds of videos and clippings and interviews together to educate people. So, that is one kind of an audience which you would be addressing. On the other side, Jurassic Park thought of going for a movie, a storyboard, characters, some elements of romance, romantic elements, some elements of disputes, some elements of something which wherein a villain also plays a role, kind of those kind of aspects were generated around the storyboard, although they took it through the scientific chord which is there. They chose a location where this can be shot. They tried to put it up as realistically as it could be. So, what did they do? They eliminated somehow the general conditions associated with when you describe such a scientific progression or a theory of evolution and those kind of things. So, they eliminated all those elements. They did not go for a documentary. They, if you will try to put up one or two or three or four elements which they eliminated, you would realize what I am talking about. Then they reduced the aspect of as far as few other things which are associated with such kind of documentaries or such kind of movies. And you remember we talked about that we have to go for non-users, non-customers, or let us say creating a new market space. So, that is what they were doing, they were creating a new market space. They could have progressed towards one more thing, they could have developed a sort of a film, animation film for example for kids only, not documentary. So, okay, animation film for kids. They could have developed a film or a movie for kids plus people who are looking for scientific association with such kind of an evolution or dinosaurs getting eliminated from this world basically. They could have talked about that. So, they could have gone for animation or let us say a movie wherein they would have some characters, but targeted towards particular kinds of customers and viewers. But then they went beyond that, they raised the level towards wherein they created a space wherein the story says that somehow dinosaurs were thought of being brought into this world again through a scientific biological process, through some scientific experiment. They might have some basis for that, what they talked about or what they depicted in that movie, what they projected in that movie. So, they raised that kind of a level. Then they created a complete scenario of different kinds of dinosaurs taking birth through their general process which has a scientific basis and so on, and then they created a story around dinosaurs. And if you will remember that they actually focused upon dinosaurs having different characteristics, and those characteristics were utilized in the movie as if we are seeing, we are watching characters in terms of dinosaurs over there along with the human characters alongside. Beautiful scene, beautiful the locations, beautiful scenarios, and then realistic storyboard, and they projected people acting in the movies as scientists and people who have been working on those kind of things, and they created that kind of a structure around that, and ultimately we realized that it reached to almost everyone. It was dubbed in several kinds of languages including Hindi language and so on, and that is how. So, if you will realize that, and it worked well. So, offerings wherein this movie includes is that it is scientific, it has a scientific perspective around it, it has a very logical intertwined kind of a story wherein you can't dispute that this does not happen when dinosaurs they get evolved, or this might happen also. They tried to suggest that this can be done somehow. Probably someone is doing experiments on these kind of things, probably they have this kind of a basis, they would have studied scientific papers on that and so on. So, they somehow put up such kind of offerings, listed those offerings, and then eliminated some of those which a general movie could have done or otherwise could have been done, and then they reduced few of the things, then they raised few of the things, and they created few of the things. I would not be listing specifically what did they create, what did they raise. I will leave it to you to decide on what actually did they do. Just list down the offerings which you can foresee in that movie as compared to general documentaries or movies associated with dinosaurs which are specifically made in through animation movie making, and then try to list those offerings and try to put up what did they eliminate, reduce, raise and create. So, that is how this structure is utilized, and I look at Jurassic Park as a blue ocean strategy example. So, that is how some of those things. One thing which I want to add here is, if you wish to compare Jurassic Park with general movies also, not only movies or animation films, or let us say documentaries made or should be made, to be made on dinosaurs. If you compare Jurassic Park with other movies, like other kinds of movies which we usually see, wherein different kinds of audience are attracted, or they are targeted towards different kinds of audience, for example, a war movie or similar kinds of movies, different stories are there, then also you would realize that this is somehow a blue ocean framework which Jurassic Park utilized. So, in any case, it would somehow can be looked upon with the perspective of a blue ocean strategy framework. Then you may think in terms of several other kinds of examples. You can look at Narayan Hrudayalaya with this kind of a perspective. An organization. So, here is a movie. You may look at it as a a complete offering. You may think in terms of it being a product also, but then a complete composite product having so much of involvement of direction, production, storyboard, screenplays, everything, so many kinds of people involved in that. So, this is a complex kind of a product if you look at this as a product. Then Narayan Hrudayalaya as an organization, I would be talking about that, but a complete organization having different levels of, or let us say a composite structure of offerings in terms of the services they are offering. We will be talking about that. Then you can look towards, let us say, iNext, bilingual daily published by Dainik Jagran Group. So, Mr. Alok Sanwal is the head of this newspaper, a person very well known to me, a very regarded personality in the field of news and media, and he actually structured this product. So, he told us this narrative, and I would be talking about that briefly as well. But that can, iNext, if you will look at, you just visit their website, it's India's first bilingual daily, which is printed and published in the language which we usually speak, let us say a mix of Hindi and English, and the news content is also structured that way. You have all sorts of news, but the placement of news, the perspective around news, the size of the tabloid or the newspaper, the positioning of the advertisements, the positioning of the the features, everything is associated with taking it towards a blue ocean framework. Narayan Hrudayalaya definitely, they went towards people who could not afford cardiac services, people who are suffering from cardiac ailments, but could not afford that at all. So, what did they do? We can see, and let us try to draw or try to work upon one of these examples. For example, if you go for a general kind of a hospital offering services, so there is a certain price level here, for example, and then you may think in terms of going for the kind of tests associated with that, doctors associated with that, and other services associated with that. So, there can be a curve which can be associated with such kind of cardiac based services, or in general hospital services, specifically because we are talking of Narayan Hrudayalaya. So, cardiac services. If another cardiac hospital comes in, cardiac disease based hospital, or the hospital related to this field basically comes in, heart and heart related ailments. So, others would also follow the same kind of a trajectory. Now, what Narayan Hrudayalaya does is slightly to be seen here, how they have sort of structured what they are trying to do. So, this is what the general curve in the form of hospitals go, and here Narayan Hrudayalaya eliminates few things, reduces few things, raise few things, and created few things. What are those? Probably they enhance the accessibility of the doctors and the hospitals for the patients by going for putting up satellite connectivity along with the help of other hospitals in whole of the country, so that their doctors can talk to the patients who require those kind of services in a distance mode. Then they operationalized their services with the help of several kinds of modern operational methodologies, different kinds of production systems which they intelligently adapted from manufacturing systems. Very interesting. You can watch about these kind of things in several documentaries which have been produced about them, or you can visit their website also. So, operationalizing things, then they did not reduce the prices of the services much, but for the patients the prices were very less. How? They incorporated Yashaswini, an insurance policy, I think by New India Assurance, to insure those patients, and at the time of ailment the cost would be borne by the insurance company, and the premium, annual premium, if I remember correctly, in the initial most phases was 60 rupees annually for a patient. So, at a price of 60 rupees for the patient gets the complete heart related support by a very, very efficient hospital which is having all the facilities and so on. So, distant mode consultation, then very low priced service for, and Narayan Hrudayalaya is earning through insurance setup. Insurance company is also earning because large number of people have been registered, and then operationalizing the system basically alongside several modern manufacturing systems and so on. So, several kinds of things were eliminated, several kinds of things were reduced, many things were raised, and many things were created. Same thing happens with iNext. I leave it to you how you look at iNext within this framework. I can draw that right now, but I am sure that if you will try to do it by yourself, listing down the offerings which iNext has for their readers and comparing the set of those offerings with contemporary newspapers, even one of their own newspapers, Dainik Jagran, then you would realize that iNext created a blue ocean strategy framework for themselves and executed that and implemented that successfully, so much so that now it has a very accepted readership sphere and very accepted growing business as far as the whole thing goes. So, I will leave this thought for to be pursued by you, so that you may be able to draw iNext somewhere here in this framework. Now, what does this 4 action framework talks about? Let us try to culminate this into a structure of eliminate, reduce, raise and create. The 4 actions framework, as the authors say, is used to reconstruct buyer value elements. So, does it make sense when I talk about Narayan Hrudayalaya and Jurassic Park and iNext here? Reconstruct buyer value elements in crafting a new value curve or strategic profile. iNext was conceived this way, Narayan Hrudayalaya was conceived this way, and they are doing huge business. To break the trade-off between differentiation and low cost in creating a new value curve, the framework poses 4 key questions to challenge an industry's strategic logic. What are those questions? The 4 actions framework poses the questions which are as: which factors that the industry takes for granted should be eliminated? Industry, probably newspaper industry, takes some factors for granted. iNext eliminated those factors. Which factors should be reduced well below the industry's standard? What did Narayan Hrudayalaya do? What did Jurassic Park do? So, what did they reduce as far as the whole situation goes? Which factors should be raised well above the industry's standards? What did they raise in terms of as far as their offerings go? And as I said, offerings is a set of, let us say, if we talk in terms of a product, price, place, promotion. And if you are talking of an organization, then operational elements are also there, human resource elements are also there, and several elements are also there. In case of products also, specifically products also, all these elements are there at the baseline definitely. If you will look at holistic marketing structure, which is given by Philip Kotler, then definitely you would realize that a product is constituted of all the elements an organization has. So, ultimately it is everything is there, but prominently in case of organizations, those elements of offerings have to be listed in terms of operational efficiency, human resource, satellite connectivity for Narayan Hrudayalaya, insurance policy and so on. And in case of Jurassic Park, there are some how did they produce that? Even to curtail the cost, they went for virtual setups which they created, and they created those scenes not physically but virtually also. Large software acumen was utilized to create those scenes which were seen as live by us, those were created virtually. That kind of a technology infusion was also implemented by Jurassic Park, which was then subsequently adapted by so many kinds of movies which were produced after that. I would not say that many other movies were not doing that before them, but after that several movies were produced with that kind of a virtual level of infusion of virtual creations and infusion of software technology, wherein Bahubali also utilized those kind of things, and several other movies they utilize those kind of things. It's a very common kind of a practice nowadays. So, which factors should be raised well above the industry standard? Which factors that the industry has never offered should be created? That is what Jurassic Park did, that is what Narayan Hridayalaya did, that is what iNext did, that is what Honda Activa did, and so on. Now, what are these 4 actions actually? Raise, create, which of the factors that the industry takes for granted should be eliminated, eliminate, and we have talked about that, reduce. And then the ultimate objective of this structure to be shown to you is that, and as the source also says, a new value curve gets generated. That is precisely which we are what we are talking of. So, what does eliminate means? Now, let us try to decipher that. Which factors that the industry takes for granted should be eliminated means that this question forces you to consider eliminating factors that companies in your industry have long competed on, and that is the point which we have been raising throughout basically, and that is the point which we tried to focus upon when I was trying to demonstrate red ocean strategy, and I was trying to put up the perspective from the side of the authors. I would not say against red ocean strategy, but when authors tried to find gap in red ocean strategy. So, you see some of the factors which organizations have been competing on, and these factors have to be eliminated. So, one indicator when you are trying to create a strategy canvas is that what is the point of competition actually. So, let us try to eliminate those aspects, those elements of the offerings. Let us try to reduce and eliminate those elements wherein actually the competition stands. Often those factors are taken for granted even though they no longer have value or may even detract from value. Sometimes there is a fundamental change in what buyers value, but companies that are focused on benchmarking one another do not act on or even perceive the change. That is the point which I tried to make when I was talking about Patanjali in the initial most discussion, and Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, where I belong to. So, that is the precise point, the third point which I tried to raise and emphasize upon. Now, let us talk about reduction. The second question pushes us or you to determine whether products or services have been over designed in the race to match and beat the competition. Have we created such a complex product which is actually not so much required? Here organizations overserve customers, increasing their cost structure for no gain. They keep on moving up the hill, adding on features to the product which might not be so much required. I would not say that it is a precise example which I am using here, but Gillette 6-blade shaver, can we think of that with this kind of a thought process? We may. Then raise. The third question pushes us to uncover and eliminate the compromises buyers are forced to make. The compromises buyers are forced to make. These compromises are usually caused by an industry's failure to see what buyers want more of some factors than the standard offering provides. We keep on developing the product and we forget somehow on the way that some of the features buyers actually do not want. They accept those, but they do not want those features. But because the standard is the standard, no one thinks to challenge that or challenge it. Then in terms of creation, the fourth question helps us to discover entirely new sources of value for buyers and to create new demand, creating new demand. When you create new sources for value for buyers, new sources of value for buyers, then actually you are creating new demand, then you are going for new market space, then you are actually going for non-customers. So, the fourth question helps us to discover entirely new sources of value for buyers and to create new demand for converting one's non-customers into customers. And that is what Narayan Hizale does, that is what INEX does, because we are talking about these examples. So, I am reiterating those cases. Now, it is by pursuing the first two questions of eliminating and reducing that you gain insight into how to drop your cost structure vis-a-vis competitors, and that is where we go for cost and differentiation, not cost or differentiation. So, the last two questions of raising and creating provide you with insight into how to lift buyer value and create new demand, and that is where cost and differentiation, they coexist, and that is wherein cost value trade off is reduced. There is a third tool that is key to the creation of blue oceans. It is supplementary analytic to 4 actions framework called the eliminate, reduce, raise, create grid, ERRC grid. This can be seen with a grid perspective also, that is what authors subscribe to. So, we can see that as well briefly, although it is well justified now more or less that this the canvas is an application tool and it can be utilized with an application perspective, and we can create canvas for almost anything which we desire for. The grid pushes companies not only to ask all 4 questions in the 4 actions framework, but also to act on all 4 to create a new value curve. So, you may start from making a grid and going to the canvas, or you can create a canvas and justify that with the help of grid. By driving companies to fill in the grid with the actions of eliminating and reducing as well as raising and creating, the grid gives companies 4 immediate benefits. That is, it pushes them to simultaneously pursue differentiation and low cost. You can identify where and how we can do that. When you identify where, how comes up by itself. So, to simultaneously pursue differentiation and low cost, to break the value cost trade off, we have just talked about it. It immediately flags companies that are focused only on raising and creating, thereby lifting their cost structure and often over engineering products and services, a common plight in many companies. We have several products around us which can be seen with this kind of a perspective. ACs, refrigerators, cooking ranges, food processors, so many things are there in your kitchen also, which you can see with that kind of a perspective. Your own television can be seen with that kind of a perspective, having so many features. It is easily understood by managers at any level, creating a high level of engagement in its application. It drives companies to robustly scrutinize every factor the industry competes on, making them discover the range of implicit assumptions they make unconsciously in competing. And this is where I would end this session, that this is eliminate, reduce, raise, create grid, and the example which authors have chosen to describe and which is described in their book as well as their website, Cirque du Soleil. So, the circus eliminated star performers, animal shows, aisle concession sales, multiple show arenas. What they reduced? Fun and humor. They reduced fun and humor. They reduced thrill and danger, and they raised unique venue. That was one of the most important things a circus could do, and they created theme around every show. They redefined the environment, the viewing environment. They elevated that. They went for multiple productions, not same kind of a thing every show, and they went for artistic music and dance based shows in their circus. They worked very well. There was a time when they were about to think in terms of winding off the business, but then they went for a blue ocean framework and they took it to the heights wherein it was accepted as a new norm, and they ran that business for several decades after that. It is a success story. We have so much to learn from these kind of stories, and we must be thankful to thinkers like on one side Michael Porter and on the other side W. Chan Kim and Rennie, who have given us two sides of the same thing to be understood parallelly, and for us to understand how strategy, formulation and execution should be done. I would be coming back to you with the next phase of blue ocean strategy, that would be the last in this sequence, wherein we would be talking about formulation and execution. Till then, goodbye.